Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Thanks to those who are tuned in and who've been tuned in the past. For those of you who have been a steady listener, a consistent listener, you know that I, from time to time, will have guests on. Today is a guest day. Today I have Jason Treu on. Jason is a consultant, he's a speaker, and he is an author. And what intrigued me about Jason was the book that he wrote, and it's Social Wealth, How to Build Great Relationships. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on the show and speaking to your fantastic tribe.
This is great. Social wealth, that number or that phrase just jumped right out at me when I was kind of looking at your profile, and that's what spoke to me to reach out to you. More or less, what you're advocating is that there's money in the people we know beyond, well, I wouldn't say it's money, but there's something there. Fair?
Yeah, there's a lot of value there. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's not just the people that we meet, it's the networks behind them. The indirect network has got really unlimited wealth in it because you don't know who someone else knows, right? And so Until you tap into that, that's the real power to getting to know people. And I think once you understand how to build great relationships with people, you're able to tap into that full breadth of those networks, right? And that's where the magic starts to happen over time, right? Where people say, oh, they have this magical breakthrough, or this thing happened or that, and they're unable to really tell you how they did it or what happened, right? Well, that is the power of creating these relationships with people over time. And at a certain level, it is a numbers game, right? I mean, you do have to meet enough people for these things to happen and for it to come together, right? And to learn how to do this. It's an art and a science, and it requires you to actually do things and engage with people and learn, just that like it is in any other skill or trait or things that you would do in business, right? It's not like you can't become a CFO if you've just graduated from college and all you know is the skills of accounting and other things required. You've got to do a lot more to get to that level. Well, it's the same thing here, right? I mean, you're not going to be great overnight, but you can be, and you can be no matter if you're an introvert, extrovert, whatever vert, it really doesn't matter. You can figure out how to do these things to work to your advantage. So there are many introverts out here that are masters at building relationships. They do it differently, but they still get to the same outcome that people who are extroverts who do this. It's just they have to work at it in a different fashion and structure it differently, which in many instances, frankly, is probably better.
Right. You're an advocate for kind of it's almost a hidden skill set. It's not tricks, gimmicks, things like that. There's something else to what you're talking about, these building relationships.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, when you have a business, right, you have a business strategy and you have a people strategy. And the problem is people put too much emphasis on the business strategy and not the people strategy. And that people strategy is really the glue that makes this come alive, right? So you've got to understand that these are skill sets taking a look at, right? If you take a look at the corporate America, in general, right, is that the most sought off skill sets and what differentiates great managers and leaders over time isn't the business. It's the people side, right? Across the board. Because at the end of the day, there's no scenario in which you get better, in which your team, meaning anyone you're working with externally and internally, doesn't get significantly better, right? There is no scenario. It breaks because there's ultimately only so much you can do as a person. So if you don't make those people significantly better in whatever you're doing, you will not be able to be successful. And that is really hard to do. And that's where most people fall down and they struggle. Even people that have success, right? What happens is they'll hit a wall and they won't be able to get over it.
Okay. Do you advocate that there's a way that you can value your network? Or is it just kind of a notion that, hey, it's getting more valuable, but you can't put dollars and cents to it.
It's really hard, I think, to do that because there are too many things that come up to that, meaning the structure of your relationships that you have with people really then dictate how much that indirect network you could tap into. So there's a lot of variables in here to go figure it out. And I've seen some people try to put together social capital calculations and value the network, and I think it doesn't really work like that. It's not a balance sheet numbering that you can do that's very clean. It's a lot of made up things that you would have to take a look into and just make generalizations in. But it is significantly more valuable over time if you start to build those relationships. At the end of the day, the real challenge begins is that sure, you can have offline relationships, but if you don't move them online at some point, you really can't tap into them fully for the most part. There are some times when that could work out, but it's really, really hard.
Now, when you say you need to move them offline, or you
meeting people in person.
Okay.
I mean, there are ways, and I've spoken to people, and there are things that you can do to build, I think, good relationships where you never fully interact with that person, but it is really hard. And it would require you to do it in a video setting and be very structured in order to try to think through, how do I take that relationship the next level?
Right.
You could think of people that work in virtual teams or remote teams, or people who do work with people that are in different places. You just have to be really mindful of how you're building the relationship,
right,
and do a lot of stuff intentionally to build trust in other parts of it that is even more so than you would have to do if someone were in front of you.
So essentially what you're saying is that if you and I are in person, there are things happening between us, little tells, little things that I might be doing that's helping you build trust or not build trust.
Yes.
And email, we lose all of that. This video chat we're having, it helps, but it's not the same as...
It's not the same as in person, but you can get, I mean, there are things to work. The problem is that it's a structured time that you have to work with, and usually people don't want to give you enough time in order to do that, right? I mean, so that's why I'm saying it's possible to do that, but it's really hard. It has to be very intentional to set up. So usually what happens is you have to move people offline, meaning in person at some point or another. I've met a bunch of people that I about 5 years ago who were doing work over in Europe with each other, and they had never met. And all of them who met at that one time said that their relationship crystallized the moment they shook each other's hands. Gotcha. Or gave each other a hug, right? So I think that you got to realize that. So the problem is the social media is a vehicle to get people online and then get them offline. But if they just stay online, the value you're going to get out of that really can vary, and it really isn't real. I mean, you think it is, but it's not, right? It's like someone who has 10 million followers. Well, what does that really mean? Well, I don't know if you don't really know. Just because they have that many on any social media platform doesn't mean that it's meaningful and that it would lead to anything or there's any benefit to using that, because at some level, there just isn't. I mean, because they don't know you and you don't know them, and they're not willing to go extend themselves to help you to do something.
All right, somebody listening here today, they're either working for somebody or they're self-employed, and we all have people around us, we all have to network. But somebody listening today, they're like, okay, I need to do a better job of building relationships. What would be my first step or my first steps? How would you address that?
Well, I think it's you've got to find the places to go, right? Because I always find, like, if you don't have the places to go, whatever you're doing is not really going to be that helpful. And so I try to look at it and I say to myself, okay, well, where are the places that have people that are socially mobile, that are influencers, that are more in a community of giving, right? Now, there are places like doing networking groups that are like that. There just are way fewer of them. And so if you do something like that, you have to go in and really do some due diligence in the group and really see if it's going to be of a benefit to you and to everyone else, right? Because a lot of them, frankly, aren't, right? It's what can I get out of it?
Right.
And the other places that I think tend to be better overall are places like charity organizations where people are getting together to help people, right? Or nonprofits, meaning museums, symphony, opera, other things that are going on. Sometimes you can include business stuff again, like chambers of commerce and other things like that. You know, your mileage can vary. It depends on the organization. But you have to start out in places where people are in a spirit of giving, helping, and inspiring people, because then they're more apt to give freely, right, with you, and vice versa. And that's where the magic happens, where people are willing to do that and not keep score. But in a lot of places where people are in desperate need, it's hard for them to do that.
Gotcha.
Because they're in a mode of taking, and most people, that's what they do, because they don't understand, because they don't have enough experience to understand that if I help someone and don't get anything back, as long as I have boundaries around that situation, which is key, that it will all come back to me at some point.
When you say boundaries, what do you mean?
Well, there are people, Adam Grant's got a great book called Give and Take, and he talks about givers, takers, and matchers. And the problem with some givers is they'll continually give to people and they just suck the life out of them, right? They give and the other people continually take, and they just allow them to stay there, right? They have a lot of imbalanced relationships where they're giving 70% and someone else is giving 30. Sure, all of this at times where we've all had friends, family members, or partner, whatever it might be, that they've needed our help. Maybe it's over a month, 6 months, a year, or something like that, with whatever various things, and the relationship is imbalanced. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who are in situations where people are taking from them because they can, and they're, 70, 30, 80, 20, 90, 10, which is a lot of people. So that's why a lot of people who give get taken advantage of, because they're not able to establish firm boundaries with people and say no. And it's just like any healthy relationship. If you don't have boundaries, you don't have a great relationship with someone, because they can't tell you the truth, and you can't have a situation where you can have healthy conflict with someone else, because you're worried that the relationship will disappear, or you have a scarcity mindset, or there's a lot of other things that go along with it, but they don't work out. And if you're in a matching situation, the problem is that I'll only give to you if you give something back to me.
Drive yourself nuts trying to keep score, more or less, really.
Yes, and most people have a scorecard, and that's really where it starts to do significant damage and what goes on overall, right? And it doesn't matter whether this is a networking situation where you're a solopreneur or a business owner, or whether you're working in an organization or whatever it might be. It's in your personal life too. It's the same thing. I mean, all this stuff, 80% of the stuff we're talking about is directly related to your personal relationships, right? Without any work or effort, it all goes back.
Oh, absolutely. I like telling people that we all have a brain, and that brain really doesn't know the difference between personal and professional relationships. It just sees relationship, and that being betrayed professionally is very similar to being betrayed personally.
There really is no difference.
Yeah.
I deal with team conflicts and reconciliation repair work. And what I've seen is that when relationships break down on teams at that level, there really is no difference between that and someone getting divorced. It's
Right.
that significant. We're just not trained to think of it like that, because there's no loss of necessarily property in a situation like that, where there is, and you have to go through a legal aspect. But the psychological turmoil and emotional turmoil that goes through something like that is massive in what you're having to do, because the amount of time you're spending with those individuals and what it can do to you and the permanent damage that it can cause. So I found it to be pretty much one and the same.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So you're the author of this book, Social Wealth, How to Build Great Relationships. That's available on Amazon for our listeners,
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
I guess you've kind of touched on your consulting. In looking through your profile and your website, you work a lot with companies and trying to help those teams. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I work with individuals and organizations really to help their leadership performance and build, great teams and cultures overall, because all these things go hand in hand, right? I mean, if you aren't functioning at a really high level as an individual, you can't build a successful business, work with clients, customers, partners, whatever you're doing, right? Manage others effectively and build great teams. So, you got to be able to do all of those things, and you've got to be able to do them quickly and be able to do significant amount of change, right? And inspire people to work harder, because if you're in a small business, essentially what you have to do to be successful is you have to get a limited amount of people to scale at a very high level, meaning that you're needing a team of 2 or 3 or 5 people to be able to win business from companies that have got 20, 30, 40, 50, or 100 employees, right? Because that's how you can scale your business over time. And if you effectively can get the most out of people, you can do that. And you don't even really necessarily have to have A players. You just have to know to get to them having to performing at their highest level and to get them working together, because that's, a lot of the data shows you that the performance indicators aren't individual performance or background or where you went to school. It's your social cohesion. I was reading a study, and I actually heard the person who runs all HR for Microsoft. They did a study where they looked globally for all their employees, and they looked at the ones that went to the top 16 schools as they ranked them globally versus anywhere else to get their education. And they looked at performance indicators, and they found zero difference. So the person who went to Harvard versus the person who went to a community college, when it comes to the business impact, they didn't find any difference.
How does that make you feel? I saw that you have Harvard on your resume.
To me, I look at education as I'm a curious person, and I think it's great.
Right.
And I think that doesn't really matter what you do and where you go. It matters how you apply the information, and you're consistently being curious over time. So to me, that's actually a good sign, because I think it should empower people to realize that no matter what they do or where they're at, the team they have is potentially a great team. They're just not tapping into them and getting the best out of them. And that's the secret sauce that makes all this stuff works. And that's the hardest part for any organization to do that, because there are things you can do that are operationalized and consistently do for an organization, but there's also a piece of it that has to be customized because of the individuals and their preferences and a lot of other things that you just can't make a cookie cutter approach to. But it all can be done. It's not like there's like a team that can't be helped or to work at a significantly better level.
People listening today, I guess, 2 kind of wrap up questions, but what would be a good referral for you? Who would you like to be introduced to? Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, really anyone that wants to do, coaching to get to the next level, someone who wants to scale their business or really wants to get more out of their team, right? I think those 3 things. And I work with people at really any size company, because I enjoy the challenge and working and helping people. Obviously small business is the backbone of the United States. And to me, that's great to work with people and to see them flourish in their own businesses. So I have a client in San Diego that has a real estate flip business that I started to work with. And it was, he was doing decent in it, but there was only a couple of people, and now it's grown, I think, tenfold in the last year. And it's been fun to watch that grow and his business grow significantly more complex as you're doing it, and seeing, all the things click with people, because this is hard, right?
Right.
I empathize. I'm doing it myself, right? You are too. Right. And you need support in helping people to do this, because you can't do it alone. I get coaching myself and try to get help with people, because there's no way I can figure this out all by myself.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's a saying out there that the hard things are easy and the soft things are hard. I think it goes something like that. But the soft things make all the difference is how the saying, I need to look it up. But essentially the hard things, the mathematical, all those things, we could figure those things out. It's all very left brain. It's the social skills that trip us up every time.
Yeah, and a really good story to tell people too is how we met, because we met through Tyler Wagner, someone who does helps authors, self-publish their book. And I met him probably, it's 2014, I think. And I was working on my book, and I was looking for people that try to understand marketing, right? And it was really hard to find anyone who really did, that wasn't wanting to charge a ridiculous amount of money, and I was really suspect in things. And so I worked with Tyler, and he's working with a couple other people, and he was the one out of the group that really stood out to me as helping me a lot and just being pretty genuine and just like literally helping me and giving me information without trying to sell me any. And we became friends over the years, and I've tried to help him. And I went to Miami one time and saw him, and it was just luck, but it was his birthday and took him out. And so, we're not keeping contact lately as much as I'd like to, but it's life, right? But we've done a lot of that and can pick up right where we sort of left off. But that's how we met, right? And so it's like these networking things happen in exactly that way, right? That relationship started 5 years ago, right? So if I wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, right? And he asked me for a testimonial, and when he was trying to do some new things in the business, and I'm like, sure, I'll write you up whatever, because it's true. And, I gave him one right away, which, helped him, but also that's how we're here right now. So all these things kind of matter for people. And I kind of look at doing all these relationship as being like Johnny Appleseed, right? Like Johnny Appleseed, the myth said, he laid all these apple seeds down because you don't know when or where it's going to blossom and bloom. And that's the whole point. It's a very non-linear piece. And if you want it to be linear, good luck. That's not life. And if you're a business owner, you understand that it's non-linear, not linear. Well, you got to treat relationship building and all of these things the exact same way.
Right. How could somebody get a hold of you? What's the best way to contact you?
You can go to my website. It's jasontreu.com. And there's tons of ways to contact me on there. So just go to the website and...
Okay. Again, it's Jason Treu. It's pronounced Troy.
Yes.
As he's indicated. Jason, I appreciate your time. Thanks for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connections. All rights reserved.